And now I'm wrestling with my brother's death, wrestling with a potential divorce with a first kid on the way.
Hey, got something really cool I wanted to run by and let you know what's going on. So I'm starting a group that will start taking a deep dive into each one of these episodes. So we'll collectively come together and talk about the shows, talk about the guests. I'll be bringing back some of the guests to do some Q&A sessions and really take a further dive into their story, their journey, the episode, talk about, maybe some of the things you wish I would have asked on the episodes, do some Q&A sessions and the like. As a friend put it to me, it's really like a book club, but for the podcast. So a couple times a week, we'll go in, we'll break down the favorite shows of the week, and have cool discussions around everything that we've heard, we've learned, and want to know about their journey. Some of these guests will come in and they'll teach part of, what makes them awesome at what they do. And then, as always, I'll be providing regular value and content in this group. It's really cool because this only is going to cost $5 a month to join this group. And you'll be able to come in, interact with everybody else in there. So I'll put a link right in the show notes for this that you can jump in, come have a conversation with us, and we will really deep dive into each one of these episodes and help us all rise up together. Thanks for tuning in, guys. It's going to be a great show today. Having the show wasn't something I started out to do. But the day I found out somebody wanted to really sponsor the show was a really, really cool experience. So, guys, I want you to take some time to go check out Point Blank Safety Services and their new nonprofit, Blue Family Fund. These guys are doing some really, really cool things. And Stacy McGovern, who's the CEO over there, has been a dear friend, and she was a guest on the show. But these guys are literally taking, the off-duty officers and putting them out in security guard role. And here's what's cool about it is, as they're protecting our lives, they don't make a whole lot of money in that regard. No first responders are paid for the value they provide for our safety and our health and taking care of us. So these guys, Stacy and her team over at Point Blank Safety Services have really found a cool way to give back to these officers by helping them provide an additional income so they can continue to support and protect us. So do me a favor, guys. Seriously, go check out pointblanksafety.com and then go look at their nonprofit, which is Blue Family Fund. Now, this nonprofit was created because of the success of Point Blank Safety Services. They wanted to give back to the families of fallen officers and be able to give scholarships away to the families of current, police officers. So do me a favor. It would mean the world to me if you would go out and help support this show by supporting Point Blank Safety Services and their nonprofit Blue Family Fund. Just tell them Donnie has sent you. You heard it on Donnie Success Champions, and Stacy will take a tremendous and amazing care of you. Thanks, guys. All right, guys, going to be a fun episode with Daniel Faust as we talk about his crazy, crazy journey of life. And, dude, it's been a roller coaster between his journey, him and his wife's journey, all the way up at how they're changing marriages and changing family lives by using their story to help people thrive in their marriages. Enjoy this one, guys. All right, guys, so it should be another fun episode. I'm bringing a buddy of mine that I've followed around Facebook from time to time. It looks like him and his wife are into just some really, really cool things. So I'm excited to bring him on the show, let him share his story, talk about all the things they're into. He's an Air Force guy, so I'm going to give him hell. But Daniel Faust, welcome to the show, my friend. Please jump in and tell us your story.
All right. So basically, we were in the Air Force starting in 2000, and then I got married to my wife in 2006.
She's in the Air Force too?
No. Okay. She met me when I went to Korea and then came to Washington And we met each other by me saying like, hey, I'm not going to date anybody. And she's like, oh, well, I haven't gone to a movie in a long time. So from there, we started to befriend each other, which was a lie. We were dating and we just didn't admit it to ourselves. About a month and a half, we went over and then decided to actually start dating for real. And about 4.5 months later, we got married. When we got married, everything just went to hell in a sense. So I don't know if anybody's been married and watching this podcast or not, but basically this is my theory on most marriages. We put on a mask when we're dating and we're like, we're awesome and everything's all perfect and whatnot. And then what happens is then we rip off the mask. And I ripped off mine. My wife ripped off hers. We both think we both suck. And then we both go over and we're fighting every single day for different reasons. And I realized that I am a verbal slaughterer in this marriage. Like I go over and I just take a situation, and because of my brokenness from my brother's death, plus my parents' divorce and all the other stuff in the world, and if something doesn't go my way, I can get verbally nasty and I can pinpoint and just go over and destroy. So I'm emotionally destroying her. She's emotionally coming out at the same time and telling me everything that she told me was false. And then we go over and we get pregnant, we get deployment orders, and we move work centers. And this all happens really fast. This is like in 2 to 4 months. And then I go over and deploy. And now I'm wrestling with my brother's death, wrestling with a potential divorce, with a first kid on the way. Just really crazy stuff all at the same time. So,
all right, hold on. Let me jump in here because you just covered a shit ton in a very, very short amount of time. So let's recap where we're at so far. So how long were you in the Air Force at this point?
Air Force 2000, married in 2006, deployed in 2007, so about 7 years.
Okay, all right. So, but you were in for 6 years before you got married.
Correct.
All right, and you knew her for 5.5 months. Did I hear that right? Before y'all got married?
6 months to be exact. 6/18/06 we met, married 12/18/06.
Okay, this is military 101 for me. I gotta ask this. As an E4, the biggest thing I told my guys is don't get married, when you're young in the military.
Mm-hmm.
Because most guys do that. They meet a young gal, 6 months later they're married, and a few months later they're popping out a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Which causes, I believe, a lot of these problems you're talking about because they're not prepared and ready for life yet. They're still trying to figure out who the hell they want to be when they grow up, but they're lonely, so they find something. I'm not saying that's what you did, but that's what most military guys do. Along that ride, you lose a brother. I'm so sorry to hear that. Is that something you're willing to talk about, or?
Yeah. So what happened was 10 years prior to the 2007, craziness in the marriage. In 1997, it was the day. No, let me restate back. 12 years prior. So 12 years prior, my parents get a divorce. Then my father decides to move to a new city. All of us were against it. And we're like, we don't want to go move. We lived in Central Falls, Rhode Island, and we didn't want to go move. And he's like, I want a house and blah, 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 blah. We don't give a flip. We're teenagers. Come on, we're selfish. We just want to be with our friends. We want to go to the schools that we're going to. He decides to move anyway, March 8th of 1997. And roughly about 51 days later, my brother, and he was nicknamed the Spider because when he played basketball, his arms and legs and appendages were everywhere. So you never got a ball past him. I'm pretty sure he could have played in the NBA, but he was mentally retarded too. So, and this is why I say that is because he got convinced to go swimming in a reservoir that had was not a sinkhole, an undertow. So they're diving in and whatnot. And this is behind a library. So basically he goes over and gets pushed in. There's an artificial undertow that got caused because they built this man-made reservoir and he gets sucked in. Supposedly the kids jumped in to go over and save him. They couldn't. They then go run back to then go call 911. This is already 15 minutes have gone by that he's been stuck under. So the firemen pull him out. And I don't have this part of the story. I got told this part of the story. And then he gets sent to the hospital. I was coming back from school. I went to a career and technical high school. So I had to take a special bus. I remember that day I yelled at him for the alarm because he always sets it and shuts it off. You ever have that brother or sister that goes over and gets up on the first crack of dawn and you're the one dragging it to the last crack of dawn? I was the last one. He was the first one. I ripped him that morning. Again, I'm like, dude, just let the alarm go off more than 2 seconds or something to that effect. I don't remember the words anymore. And then I find out at the end of school when I get home, it's like Steven's been in an accident. My dad rushes to the hospital, finds out he's in a drowning accident. They officially then have us come over afterwards. And about 6:35 that evening, he dies. 5 minutes later, he comes back to life, and they're like, well, he's under 17. Let's go skyrocket him to the children's hospital so we can deal with him at a children's-based level. Well, the children's hospital came to the same conclusion that, yes, it was a miracle he came back alive, but he's slowly declining, oxygen, everything else. All the organs are shutting off. If we keep him alive on the machines, he's just going to be a vegetable. So he officially canned out at 10:35 that night. So that went over, and I said F you to Jesus and everything else. I wasn't even a Christian then. It's kind of funny. How do you do that when you don't have them? But I said that, and then I just became jaded and bitter and filled my void with just tons and tons of stuff. So again, my parents got divorced in 95. My brother died in 97. My parents got divorced 18 months prior on my birthday. Take all that and package that into going over and becoming a Christian in 2002 while in the military, and then getting married in 2006. So all those things, I don't want to slow down. I didn't want to slow down in the sense of the marriage. I should have dealt with more of my junk. That was the problem in marriage. That was the real problem.
Yeah, because you were like a Molotov cocktail ready to pop, sitting in all this stuff swirling around, your head and mind. And a lot of people do that, right? They don't deal with their personal stuff. They just, do some sort of, I'll just get past it eventually type thing versus actually dealing with it. And all that stuff does is fester and then becomes a powder keg. And somebody usually ends up becoming the target of that explosion release. And unfortunately for a lot of people, it becomes their spouse because they know you more than other people do. And some people get embarrassed by that vulnerability.
I would agree. And then the proximity of that person, and then trigger words and things of that nature and whatnot. And then if you take your brokenness with the person and then you associate that with the moments of your past, then that can become that way. And that happened for both of us because my wife came from a broken family. I came from a broken family. I won't go into her details, but short version of it is that physical and mental abuse and whatnot. And it was on years until 16. So you think in your mind, like at least this is the psychological thing, oh, two Christians come together to get married. It's happily ever after. No, if you don't deal with your junk, it's happily ever beating. That's what happens.
Well, but that's that's what society tells you, that if you follow a faith, you follow a study, you follow belief, you have commonalities, whatever else, those two things will solve and fix your marriage and make you okay, which is all bullshit, right? Because none of that stuff is the truth. Just because you follow a philosophy of some sort doesn't automatically give you a free pass on life. Right?
No, it's going over and dealing with it with that faith, empowering you to go over and to do that. So back to 2007, I'm now deploying. It's May of 2007, and I am wrestling with my brother's death and his divorce. I went to a chaplain, and it was the first time with going to a chaplain, plus reading this book called Positive Personality Style. So I'm looking at the Bible, I'm dealing with the chaplain, and reading this book, Positive Personality Profiles. It was the first time I understood how God wired me. And I was like, wow. I'm like, this is the reason why I react the way I do. This is why the responses that I have. This is how I go over and love my wife. It was the first time I could take scriptures that we learned in the Christian faith, how to love our wives and love our spouses and our kids, and become reality. So it was like an awakening. And then I was at the end of that deployment, near the end, I was asking God, why did you keep me here? Because my brother's deaf. He's like, well, I kept you here to teach the world better relationships. And almost like one of those movies that all the things started connecting together until that point just came to me. I was crying in the middle of the AOR. Glad dudes weren't around me. It's already awkward crying. And then you have dudes around you.
No. Trust me. From the Marine Corps perspective, Air Force guys cry all the time. It's okay. We get it.
No, that's good. That's good. So I'll make sure I get punched in the face if I'm with a Marine or if I'm crying. So yeah, and he said he kept me here to teach the world better relationships. So everything just pieced together. I work in the comm squadron at the time, and I called my wife. I said, God's giving me my calling. I'm starting to work through this stuff, and this is what I want to go and do, is teach the world better relationships. Take this DISC model of human behavior and bring this to the world, and especially the churches, because we can take all the vertical principles in our faith, and we don't know what to do with it. And then on the other side, on the secular side, you look at all the horizontal principles, the pop psychology, the self-improvement, all those things, and we don't know how to deal with it. I saw both at the same time. I'm like, this is how you deal with reality. You go over and you take your faith and you join that with general revelation and you put that together, and then you can actually live that out. And that's helped us thrive in our marriage. So we pressed on. We didn't go towards divorce. But unfortunately, as another time hit the fan, it got worse for a season. And that's when reality set in. So there's moments of when initial truth comes in, and then there's reality of the truth when it's implemented. So I get back from deployment, have my first child, then like 6 months later, I get pregnant again and have a second child, almost lose that child to surfactant issues. That's like the liquid that's in the lungs. If it doesn't form, you can't breathe. I was already deployed again. This was my second deployment. And yes, Air Force deployed more than once, just so you know. Not as long as you Marines, but we deployed. And then, so I had faith. And then we then eventually get orders out of McCord, because we met in Washington. And then we got orders to Ohio. And we're like, Lord, where's the next place to go in this calling? So I had chaplain assistance on the radar, and I had mental health. So I go to the chaplain assistants and ask for the cross train. So change your MOS. And I said, hey, I'd like to change this MOS. Like, Dan, we know you. You'll be angry and bitter inside, and you want to punch people in the face. I'm like, and he told me reason why. He gave me X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, that's 100% accurate. I'm like, yeah, I would want to be the chaplain, but I don't agree with 100% confidentiality. So if someone's going to murder somebody, I can't condone you just going over and saying like, okay, I'm going to keep taking care of you until you go to mental health or to the cops or to security forces or whoever it is. So I'm like, okay, so I cross-trained to mental health. I went against God's calling on that particular guard, and my wife. My wife had great wisdom, and she's like, you'll love working in there, but it will destroy you. And I'm like, grass is greener on the other side. I'm tired of this comm stuff, tired of fixing people's computers and whatnot. So we get the assignment, we get Ohio, and we're like, okay, Ohio. You're happy you got something.
Just for the record, my Ohio listeners, I love you, but wow, what a boring damn state. They got some great food, they've got some great things to see, but wow, there's not a lot going on in Ohio.
No, especially in 2010. And they didn't have Facebook data center, which they're building now. I mean, come on, now it's going to be a thriving environment.
Right?
There you go. So if Facebook changes Ohio's place. So I go from McCord to go to Ohio, and initially everything's fine. But again, life issues come up. We didn't know we had twins. So my wife got pregnant again the third time, and I've been wanting twins since the first one. And the doctor's like, this is a baby and this is the yolk sac, and they're right next to each other. And I said, what if one's hiding behind the other? That is not impossible in the 35 years I've been a doctor. So I go to tech school. My wife's heart rate and headaches get really high, so she goes to the ER. They check the baby's rates like 212 beats a minute. Either your baby's dying or there's something wrong. They break out the ultrasound. One baby boop, pops behind the other and starts jumping. So that my wife's headache triggered the ER issue, which figured out it was twins. And then we find out we have twin-to-twin syndrome, because she got really big really fast. You get big. Yeah, I'm going to get there. Okay. So twin-to-twin syndrome in layman's terms doesn't matter if it's Air Force, Army, Marines, or Coast Guard. I'm going to dummy it down. Is that basically too much blood to one twin, too little to the other. So you overload the baby and the baby dies, and the other baby doesn't get enough blood, and then the heart stops. So it's kind of like pipes. If you have too many pipes on one side and too little on the other. So literally there was 10 veins on one side, 6 on the other. So that's what makes you grow really big, because one baby gets really big and then the womb compensates and whatnot. So that's why at 3 months, she looked 9 months pregnant. They're like, are you ready to go? I'm like, I'm not even done the first trimester. They're like, what? They're like, yeah. So they drain her in a sense, which is really creepy, but they do. They literally drain her.
That just sounded creepy. You just said they drained your wife.
They did. They literally did.
I'm a guy who doesn't have kids, so you know.
They do. They literally put something into your stomach and into your uterus, and they literally take the fluids out because they think that would solve the problem. So then I'm in tech school, and I'm going to mental health tech school, and I get called from my wife, and they're like, yeah, it's getting serious. They're sending me to San Francisco to either get laser ablation, which is either cutting off the arteries to balance it out, or go over and do stunting, which is killing the second child. So I'm literally get authorized from the military, God's grace, that they said, hey, we end school at 2 p.m. today. We're going on a long day weekend. We will fly you to be with your wife for that weekend. So I'm about to fly back to San Francisco out of Texas, Wichita Falls, small little town, aircraft are puddle hoppers. So I get to the airport and it's so foggy, it's ridiculous. I'm like, Texas fog? Makes no sense to me. But anyway, it's foggy as all get out. So they cancel my flight and say, hey, we're going to bus you to DFW, and then DFW will get you to San Francisco. Well, my wife calls and is like, they're either going to do laser ablation or stunting. The doctor wants to go stunting. And I'm like, what is stunting? And he tells me, and I'm like, that's basically murder. I told the doctor around the thing. He's like, that ain't murder. I said, you're making an active choice to cut off the blood supply, right? Yeah. Well, that's murder. That's active. I mean, he goes over and disagrees. And I'm like, they said, we need to make a decision in an hour. So because of that plane not flying me to DFW, the bus comes up and it says Agape Tours. If you know anything about the Bible or your listeners, but it links agape in the Greek means unconditional love. And it flashed back to me. God unconditionally loves me no matter what, the whole situation. He's loved me in my stupidity, loved me in my sin, loved me even when I said F you to him. And I'm like, I need to do the same thing for my kids. So I'm going to do every fighting chance. So we agreed to laser ablation. The doctors were against it, but they went over and did it. They were concerned about the twins going blind, and they didn't. Everything went fine and everything went normal until about a few weeks later. Somehow the womb switched over. So twin B, which was Hope, went over and now is getting blood like crazy, and now Trinity's getting none. So they go over and they monitor every single week. I graduate tech school. I see her for a night, and then I'm taking care of 2 kids. So I graduate, get home. She's like, I gotta go. They told me I have to get to the base first. So she gets there, and it was just, I met somebody at a conference during the time when I was in tech school that said, hey, we can take care of your family. His name is Dale Black. He's a friend of mine now. I've known him for years. So he takes care of my wife and everything else while I'm trying to get 2 kids and a house closed out. Me and a dude that I met from Ohio, we trucked. So 2 dudes and 2 kids trucking from Washington to Ohio, taking care of kids. We had some crazy stories there, and then I guess
just for the record, that's like every military move that ever happens. You know, wife goes one direction, the kids and the husband, and somebody he knows all throw a crap in a truck, and you're scooting it across America. I mean, that's like military move 101.
Yeah, just so funny because you really do. Now that you summarize it, the Arkansas move was the same way. So yeah, so we get there and. I get there like March 20th or something of that year, 2010. And then she delivers on March 31st. My leadership comes over and says, you need to test for E6 today. I said, my wife is delivering twins and could die. I said, I'm not taking that test. You must take that test. I had to get my senior master sergeant E8 type and get the commander to waive my test. I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm not missing the birth of my children for a rank test. I'm like, I don't care. I'm like, so we have the twins. They're in the NICU for 60 days because they're so small. So we kept going back and forth and commuting. I'm setting up a home. I'm working now with mental health patients that are ranging from psychotic to like, hey, I nail bite. There's a drastic difference in spectrum. And I'm learning how to do all that.
I got to ask really quick. I'm a nail biter. Does that make me psychotic?
No. You're on the lower end. It's okay. No, I don't diagnose as a mental health tech. All I do is observe, and then I tell the doc, and then the doc
So you're the guy that goes, yes, he does nail bite.
Yes, I do. That or if he's going to commit suicide or homicide, I'm like,
right, I get it.
Or you catch the person that's like security forces or an MP and they bring in a knife or a gun into the clinic. And I'm like, yeah, you can't bring that in there. Let's take that out. So I was that guy. So the twins get better after those 60 days. So now we have 4 kids in 4 years of marriage working in the mental health clinic. And I would say that was the worst decision of my life, cross-training to mental health, because it took my transition out. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit. So I worked in that career field for 2 years. Twins got better. We normalized life and whatnot. I went on another deployment. So I'm on my 4th deployment at this point. So I forgot about the Florida one, but I went to Florida. So that's not a real deployment, so I won't let you count it, but I'll count it for myself. Because I was supposed to go to Iraq, and I got diverted to Florida. So, I mean, I was going to be in the frag. So, I mean, I'll count it as half a deployment. So I go over and get to, so 2 years go by, and I go on deployment. It's Kuwait this time. So I'm supporting the combat truckers down there and all the mental health stuff. The first 6 weeks goes fantastic. They go over and the person's like, do my admin and computer work. I'm like, awesome. I can do that. That's simple for me. The new provider comes in. It's like, oh, we're going to increase our patient load 300% and you need a counsel. Really? 3 months of training and you want me to counsel people that are suicidal, homicidal, and nail biters. I can deal with the nail biters, but I can't. The other 2 are a little more complicated. They're like, oh, the provider will help you. I said, I've already had people tell me that I'm not good for this career field, but they won't let me go because I academically do so well. I got a 93 in the class. I was the 3rd highest person in the class, but their definition is like of failure is I'd have to bomb the school. I'm like, I'm not going to go bomb the school just to go back to the career field. I'm like, you got to have another way. I'm like, if I'm not good on the soft skills, then let me go. Oh no, you got to bomb school. I'm like, that's going to look real well. I'm like, so they send me on this deployment. And I get down there, and the 6 weeks were first great. Now the new provider does a whole different way. And that's the thing in the mental health clinic world is that they'll manage their way. It's almost like getting a new CEO every time you get a new doc. It's like, this is the way I manage my planet. I'm like, great. I need oxygen. No oxygen for you. You already adjusted. What? I'm like, so they toss me in with suicidal, homicidal patients. They watch me.
And here's the crazy thing about this is I had Greg Buda on the show, and I forget what his primary MOS was, but when he was deployed in Iraq, literally in a matter of like 24 hours, he's now the guy that goes out and recovers the remains of fallen soldiers, which wasn't his primary MOS.
Yeah.
They just reassigned him MOS, and that's just crazy to me that the military does that. These guys that have no training. So, I mean, I know you had 3 months of training, but it's a similar type scenario where you don't have hardly any training. Damn sure not enough skill sets other than being a friend, if you will, sitting across from somebody who's suicidal in nature and trying to work through them while you're dealing with your own shit, which is difficult as hell. It just blows me the way that the military will so readily change somebody to something that they're not mentally prepared for, and they're basically like, suck it up, buttercup, you got to do this.
Yeah, that is the great qualities in the military, and that's the scary qualities in the military. I think that's why we can be great entrepreneurs. Like, hey, we got thrown in death and frag. I mean, going over and dealing with a financial budget is simple. I mean, so that's the difference. So yeah, so I got thrown in, and then they gave me suicide homicidal patients with somebody watching me, of course, and everything. They're like, you don't get this. I said, I told you when you told me to take patients, I didn't get this.
What the hell did you expect, right?
I told you guys this at Right Pat. I told you guys this in tech school. Nobody's listening to me. Everybody that was E8 and above is like, you'll be fine. We'll throw you in the frag. You'll do fine. I'm like, E7 and below is like, he doesn't get this. And everybody below is like saying, he doesn't get this. If you give him admin, you give him IT, you can have him give him a speaking engagement. You can give him to speak on a topic. Fantastic. Without that, if it's patient care, go over and let him just document for you. Let him type it in the computer. That's fine. So they go over and they talk, the provider, and then the technician talk, and then they get back with me. They're like, you're not getting this. We need to talk to the commander. I said, that's fine. I don't get it for a long time. So the commander is actually a good friend of mine now, but he was always pulling off of me and walking talks in the desert. So It was really cool. It was almost like walking with God because he's the colonel and I'm the staff sergeant walking along, talking to me and everything.
And I'm sure he really just loved the fact that you just compared him to God, just so you know. You got your own footprints in the sand. Did you jump on his back and so he had one footprint? I mean.
I don't think I would piggyback on him. I think he would collapse. But anyway, I thought it was cool. So he's like, Dan, you don't get this. I said, I can do all your IT. I said, your IT person sucks. He's always coming to me for help. He's like, well, technically that's true, but he's like, because of your AFSC, that MOS, I can't have you do anything else. It's funny in the Army. They don't care. They throw you in wherever. Like that MOS is just a code. In the Air Force, we hold it really to heart. So
I have family that was in the Air Force. I'm just curious. Did you call that commander at that point? Did you call him Bob, Bill, Sam?
Never. Not me personally. I always called him their rank. It was Colonel Rice. So no.
Okay.
The regulation just changed recently. They said, hey, if you're higher ranking, you can call the lower ranking people by their first name. They officially just changed that like a month or two ago. And I'm like, I'm still not going to do that. I'm not going to call you Bob. I don't even call the lower ranking people Bob. I don't care. Now, the guy that got out of the service and now he's a civilian, I call him Bob the PC builder. But I mean, because now he's not Master Sergeant. Now he is literally Bob. He's like, call me Bob. I'm like, well, you're a civilian. I'll call you Bob.
Right.
But no, I never
blew me away of being around the Air Force guys. And, you'd meet, I don't know, y'all's ranks, but a captain and someone would be up there talking to Steve or Bob or Bill and they're carrying on. And I'm like, hey, Bob, how's it going? And then I'd find out he's a captain. I'm like, oh, shit, I'm sorry, sir. Forgive me for that. That was completely improper. And the first word out of his mouth goes, you must be a damn Marine.
Yeah.
But
yeah, so we were walking in the sand like on a regular basis because this thing was over the 4 months I was there. And he's like, yeah, you don't get it. I said, no, I don't get it for a long time. I told him I could be your IT person. He's like, well, that'd be a disservice to the Air Force. So he sends me back home early. And when you get sent home early from a deployment, it's usually mental and physical health, or you don't get the job in the Air Force, and well, you don't get the job. So they decided they were going to send me back to IT, and I'm like, well, that's perfect. I mean, I hate the job, but I do it well. Everybody loves me. I have like 4s and 5s on my EPRs, which is high, typically, and they wanted me back. But there was this crazy thing in the Air Force Enlisted Classification Directory. So another regulation that says, unless you are mentally retarded or have a speech impediment, we can't kick you out of the career field. I said, so I have to start stuttering like a fool like I did as a kindergartner or get below 100 IQ? I'm like, so I'm either getting a TBI or I'm going to go start stuttering. And I do start stuttering after 16 to 18 hours of consciousness, but that's everybody on the planet. I mean, so long story short, they're like, well, they went up to the 3-star equivalent civilian. He's like, I can't waive this. He's like, even though you're awesome for comm and the comm people want you back, I can't waive this. So they gave me a referral EPR because they couldn't get me to go back to comm. And they said, okay, your enlistment is done. Because they didn't want to give me a 90K bonus because if I re-enlisted in that MOS, there's a 90K bonus attached. And they're like, we're not getting the max out of you. We get great for you on state side, but deployment, depending on the provider, we want you to do everything and anything. Which in reality, if you're an officer, you just adjust accordingly.
Right.
That's it. But that's what they came to. So I had to transition out. So in that transition out, that next year was then when hell brought up again. So I stupidly keep going. I already made a decision, go mental health. I'm looking at doing marriage ministry at the time. And I'm like, let's go down to Arkansas. We connected with this ministry a year and a half prior. They really help out marriages. That's what we want to go over and do. We want to help out relationships in general, but marriage was our focus at the time in churches. We get interviewed. They said, hey, we love your story and everything else, but you need to raise 90K. You need to have 200 families that can help you raise that 90K. I said, I've kind of moved a lot. I don't have 200 families. And 90K is a lot of money to raise. So, but I stubbornly go over and say, okay, they told me no. I go over and like, well, let the Air Force move us down there. And then maybe we can work with like churches and like-minded people. Everybody tells me no, military mindset. You pull your bootstraps, you do it your damn self. And then that's when hell basically broke loose. 2012, 2013, we moved down there. It's initially fine. My wife's struggling with all this other mental stuff. I'm still being a jerk depending on the day. And she goes over and gets into the whole like SIHI stuff. Like seriously, it impacts her, like the whole move and everything else. I caught her. It's suicide, homicidal stuff. So she went over and tried to jump out the window with me coming home. And I was a prior mental health tech. I had to talk her down, and then we had to have her go into the hospital for a couple of days to then go over and deal with that. And it was an awakening for her because she's totally transformed since then. But all that stress. So I'm the one that kind of pushed that. I'm the one that said, she gave me forewarnings and knowledge and everything was happening. Everything was collapsing in front of me. And that was the epitome of that. She came out of the hospital a lot better mentally and emotionally, but she lost her voice. So she literally was mute. And it was like, it kept just pushing the breaking point. And then I got out of the military, was trying to run the business. She had that suicidal ideation. She goes in the hospital. I'm dealing with that while taking care of kids and then trying to look for work. And we almost go homeless all within this span in a matter of months. And it was down to $300. It was after the incident. So after the incident, got down to $300. I was sitting in a chair similar to this. I love recliners. But I was just like, Lord, what do I do? I said, I am grinding out and I am looking at 2 to 20 jobs. I mean, looking at 1,000 jobs a day, applying for 2 to 20 jobs a day, going to at least a couple interviews a week, and nothing's budging. I'm like, Lord, what do I do? I try to go to all these agencies to get help. And they're like, well, you have a little more in your checking account than normal. I'm like, the rent's coming out tomorrow. Let me buy a candy bar. Then you can help me. And they're like, we can't help you. 3 hours in these appointments, can't go over and help me. And I'm like, okay. So I got a deposit that morning when I was praying and again, crying in the chair. We're Air Force. We can cry at least 3 times. So I'm going to cry one more time for you. So I go over and I'm like, a deposit comes in and smartphone. And I'm like, whoa, Lord, cool. Going to go verify because I don't want to find out it gets Boric the next day. I found out I was 40% disabled. So all the stuff they put me through the military, I was 40% disabled. So that came in and then a job came in and everything then skyrocketed back up. But then this company decided to dissolve the position 5 months later. So we go over and again, we're struggling again. And we're like, all right, what are we going to go over and do? So we started looking back at Washington. We went over and applied for jobs. We went over and got a job over there and then moved ourselves back to Washington. So we did one big loop. It's like, we hate Washington. Let's get out of there. And then we went, whoop, right back where we started. And this is where the culmination point of the really suck and then the transformation happens at the same time. So I get over there and I get a job. I'm traveling across the nation. My coworker shoots 12 people. That job goes away. And I just moved into a rental house.
Oh, hold on. You just said your coworker shoots 12 people.
Yeah, the Washington. I have a crazy story. I really do. The Washington D.C. Naval Yard shooter in 2013 was my coworker.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so that's the job that I got. So I took my IT background and was looking for jobs in IT. So that was the majority of my career until 2010. So I went over and got the job. I got hired and I worked with the guy in Maryland. And then they said, hey, Faust, because we were all military background, so we went by last name. Like, hey, Faust, you're drilling this weekend. There's no point of you coming all the way back to D.C. when you're in Arkansas drilling. So we're going to send you back home to your family. I was transitioning my unit from Arkansas to Washington, but they forced me to stay in Arkansas. My first sergeant was a bud. He's like, you are always attached to this unit in the reserve. You will never leave. I'm like, and then he left 2 months later. Really? So I had to wait until he left to get the new first sergeant to release me to go to Washington. So I drilled in Arkansas, went back to Washington to go work because it was a nationwide company. We just went from Navy base to Marine base, PC swapping. That's all we did. So he sends me back to Washington State instead of Washington, D.C. And then Monday morning, I'm working on the Navy base over there. And they're like, there's a shooting in the D.C. Naval Yard. I'm like, I have friends there. And then I come to find out it's from our company. What do you mean it's from our company? And they said it was a worker there. And I'm like, there's only 6 of them there. And I know who all of them are. And find out it's this guy. And I'm like, wow. And I'm like, I have a mental health background. I worked with these people. He's so underlying hit it. It was ridiculous. And we had 2 guys that had the same first name. So when they announced the name, it was Aaron so-and-so. I didn't know their last names. I only knew their first names. I'm like, I thought it was the more eccentric guy that was always venting, not the quiet guy who was underlying brewing and snapping. So it was the underlying guy brewing and snapping. He put 3 assault rifles together in the bathroom before he went on his shift. And then they assigned him building 197. And instead of replacing their PCs, he replaced the PCs with bullets and popped people in the cubes. Because that's what we did. We went to cubes, knocked on the door, like, hey, I'm your PC guy. I'm going to replace your PC. So they didn't check anything at the gate. he has his backpacks. You see him in the bathroom putting them together in the video supposedly after, and then he's going popping along singing a song. So they totally deleted our jobs. So we got deleted and we had to look for work again. And then I get another job. I had several other jobs after that, but the one job that took the cake that almost destroyed our marriage was, it was June 1st of 2013. I was working an IT job in Bellevue, and everything was just culminating up. It was just thing after thing after thing, and then not dealing with the marriage emotionally. Like, hey, sex was a Band-Aid at the time. You go over and you get in an argument. Hopefully sex heals, and it doesn't. It's a process of it, but it's not an ultimate Band-Aid. We used it almost like a tourniquet. It was a bad tourniquet. So it was June 1st of 2013, and it's her birthday. So I'm a total schmuck at this day, total schmuck. And I'm wrestling with divorce and threatening with divorce on her birthday while I'm in Bellevue and she's home and everything else. And it was this, again, God hitting me of realizing that night or the day after, she basically spiritually kicked me in the nuts and like how much I was on my words and everything else. And I realized I'm like, I just think that way. Every time someone goes over and challenges me, everything goes back and it links back. And I'm like, wow, 7 years. Like I saw myself in all those arguments. I almost saw myself from her eyes looking at me. And I was like, wow, I really needed change. And so did she. So she started really wrestling with her mental health, which gave her a lot of healing. I started wrestling with my nasty mouth and trying to give that to Jesus. And that's when the transformation started happening. We started seeing the resurrection of things. Because before then, we were just destroying each other. And we have 4 kids, and 4 kids in 10 generations will impact 250,000 people. So we're really not just impacting ourselves, we're impacting generations to come. So even if it's just for myself, it's going to be for others. And that's when we really started getting the clue. I'm like, God had us to teach the world better relationships, but we have to get ours right first. So we were doing our business, but it was on the side because it just never got up and prospered enough. So, and that was when the culmination changed. We still had a ton of job changes. We've wrestled with homelessness 3 times just because crazy other stories I could tell you just make no sense. That will be in my 3rd book, Leave No Veteran Behind. But we culminated in Washington. Washington was horrible. After 3 years of trying to get things back up to thriving, the people didn't want the business. My military orders ended, and that's when we started to go look at Arizona. We were wrestling with Arizona for years. We're like, her health was horrible too. She got migraines like 10 to 15 times a month. So all these other health issues. So when we moved here, it was a breath of fresh air. Everything just restarted and rebooting. Like there's thriving opportunities. The unit actually likes me. They don't hate me. All these other things. I got a decoration right before I left that McCord unit. But again, they ran out of money because they went over and said, we have money. And they went like this. I was working for the vice wing commander. It's almost like working for the brigadier general. And he goes over and tells me, Dan, because everybody have our first names. He's like, we're broke. I said, sir, I projected a budget months ago. He's like, I'm sorry. He's like, I wanted to hold it, but the wing commander said everybody could have it and it went away. And it's like, he's like, you going to be okay? I said, like anything else. I said, I've had coworkers try to shoot people. I've had my life threatened from a coworker at Intel. I'm like, not Intel, Boeing. Sorry, different company. I mix them up sometimes. But I said, I will just keep pressing on. Because I tell people, I said, if I'm a dollarer or a billionaire, I'm going to help you with your relationship. I said, I'm going to continue to press on. So we sold everything, literally everything, down to like a car full of stuff, moved down to Arizona, and we literally started with air mattresses and everything else. And we just been building up ever since. And then our relationship got a lot better. My wife got a lot of healing, all the things that they say mental health doesn't heal. I think God can heal anything. And I've seen such a transformation from 2013 to 2018. She's my partner. She's my spouse. I want to work with her. It's sexy when she's like, I'm going to do a podcast. I'm like, oh yeah. It's like such a miraculous difference. And then for myself, I realized that myself outside of him is going to be naturally sarcastic. And sarcastic means tearing of flesh. People can say what they want, but that's what I believe. So I went over and started, God helped me change that. And then our heart now is to go over and say, hey, let's take all the brokenness we've gone through. And instead of just living and learning, let's learn and live. And that's where our business name got rebranded out. Because we're like, why do you keep living and learning? Why keep hitting the wall? That's like going over and saying, go shoot a wall. Why am I going to shoot a wall? That's just stupid. How about I shoot the target? I'm like, so that's where our business name changes from Learn to Live.
Holy
and that's
cow, dude. I mean, what a damn ride. So I can't even try and begin to recap all the crap you just went through and the series of adventures you guys have been on.
Mm-hmm.
But I do love the impact of the story behind it and what you guys have persevered through. In one hand, you could say it's a typical, American marriage. On the other hand, it's one of those, holy shit, you went through a lot, type things. So I love the fact that you guys have taken those life lessons on y'all's journey and are now using it as a tool to help others. Yeah. Walk us through that a little bit. What are you guys doing now?
Yeah, the business got rebranded to Learn and Live because Perspectives and Reflections sounds like a spa. That's what I found out.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, I know. It took me a long time to learn that. It's like, so we've cut down our brand and we focus from the bedroom to the boardroom because that's where conflicts start. Conflicts start in the bedroom. They transfer to the living room and they carry into the kids and the family. And then if they don't get resolved, they carry to the boardroom. Sometimes you can mask for a while and say, everything's fine. That's our standard American answer. But it carries over time.
Well, that's interesting. I don't mean to jump in, but I got to. Because I always tell everybody that, they talk about balance in life, but I don't think they always explain it well enough. And here's a simple balance that you must have. If work life is not good, family life sucks. If family life is not good, work life sucks. That's the balance and congruity you've got to have in your life. So that's an interesting perspective. I like it.
Yeah. So we go over and we help people focus from there. So we come from the universal language of the DISC model human behavior.
Yep.
And we focus if you want marriage wellness, family wellness, or business wellness. We also focus on faith, but we only bring it if the person's looking for it. That's how we go love on people. Because in the military, it's the same way. It's like some people are open to the topic. Some people are not open to the topic. So you can either have general revelation that we use the DISC model human behavior and tried and true facts and things, and we come from a consultant base. Or if you want to add an element of faith to say, hey, I know how to live out the general principles, but how do I live it out specifically? We mirror that together. So, we not mirror it together. We combine it together. Mirror would sound wrong. You're looking at each other. So we do that through consultations. We do that through workshops. We do that through seminars. We've published our first book, Leave No Marriage Behind. We're working on and finalizing our second book, Leave No Family Behind. And these are books that are informational. So you don't read them like a normal book. It's almost like a manual, like go-to. So if you're looking to thrive in sex, you read chapter 9 under the sheets. If you're sucking in communication, you go read People Puzzles chapter 2. So each chapter sits on its own. So it's kind of like a manual because there's so much information out there, but you don't know where to go. It doesn't matter if you're a Christian, a non-Christian, an Army, Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard. There's so many resources. There's information overload. So we've taken a lot of consolidation. We said, what is the best of the best that worked out in our marriage and what we've heard from other people that work well. And we put that and say, here's in a chapter. Because we love to help in that way.
That's awesome. It means you're just living your truth and you're willing to share the shit you guys went through to say, this is how we fixed everything in our marriage as we continue to move forward. So where do you think this journey's taking you guys? Where's this all going to lead to for y'all?
Our hope and our dream with Learn and Live is to be an 8-figure international business. So when you're looking to thrive from the bedroom to the boardroom, that you have us as resources, not just me as Daniel Faust, not just my wife, Michelle Faust, but subject matter experts in marriage, family, faith, leadership, and communication. So we bring the best of the best and even people that are up and rolling, because that's one thing that most people forget about is that in a business, they always look for the big people and they always just raise the big people. We want to go raise anybody that's growing up in that particular regard. We're doing 2 marriage cruises, one in February, one in August. And we're looking for speakers that are just passionate, that want to go help people thrive in marriage and sort those enemies that are in marriage. The same thing in leadership. There's certain enemies that attack leadership, and we just want to bring the best of the best or grow people up. Because the funny thing in the speaking world compared to the music world, we go over and do cover bands, and we help those people lift up. In the speaking world, we're like, dog eat dog, do it yourself. And once we get big, we forget about you. And you don't see a lot of mentorship unless it's a speaking company, of course, that does that. We want to go over and power. So as we're doing these events, we help get people discovered, and then Learn and Live becomes a resource and a hub for those areas, and not just say, oh, I mean, I love Tony Robbins. I love Zig Ziglar and all those people, but you always get focused on the person. And if that person's not there, then you don't go. And that's where we want to go focus on, is that we bring the best of the best within those realms. You do great on success stories. So why am I going to go over and try to rebuild and say, I'm going to do success stories? That's what you do. And that's how you thrive as a business. So we want to do the same thing, is that we go with like-minded people that are the best of the best and grow people. So I focus best on communication and intimacy. But when it comes to parenting teens, I have no flipping clue. I only can theorize. So I'm not going to do it myself. So.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, and guys, we'll make sure we put information about the cruises he has coming up and some of the events they have coming up and all the links to their websites. You know, I mean, seriously, if you're struggling in your marriage, I mean, the best place to go get advice is from somebody who's been to the dark side of the marriage, but instead of throwing in the towel and walking away, persevered through it and is still thriving or attempting to thrive in their marriage and proving, you know, their own truths as they continue to move forward with it. Danny, I got to tell you, this has been an awesome story. I really appreciate you sharing your journey with us. This is how I like to wrap up every show. If you could leave my audience with a quote, a phrase, a motto, a mantra, you know, something they can carry with them on their journey, something they can pull out of their toolkit, especially when they're stacked up against it and going through the tough times, what would be that quote, mantra, saying, or phrase that you'd say, pull this out and remember this?
I would say thriving is a choice. That's the biggest thing. In a marriage, in a business and everything else, you're going to go hit the hard times. It's going to happen. It's not an if, it's a when. But if we make the choice to persevere through it, then and you make thriving a choice, then you will go over and thrive. Because people think it's like, oh, because right now we're at a point where emotionally and spiritually thriving. We're not fiscally thriving yet, but because we're emotionally and spiritually thriving, we can pursue still through the other trials and to break that. And that's the biggest thing, is that thriving is a choice. That's how I would say my summary is: thriving is a choice.
That's beautiful, brother. I really appreciate you coming on the show, man, sharing your story. I guarantee that the listeners coming here, especially the ones who are struggling with their marriage, just got a ton out of this, man. So thanks for sharing your journey with us.
Yeah, thanks for letting me on, man.
Guys, really thank you for listening to this episode. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun putting these together. I wanted to make sure before we get out of here that you knew what we were doing with social content. What we found was, because of the podcast, we have a unique way of helping you get your social content out on a very easy way. What we're doing is we're interviewing people. And from that interview, we will capture a lot of information that will then be turned into videos, memes, articles, all things you can use for your social content. I know, like for me, one of the biggest struggles I had was, what do I put out there? What do I say on a regular basis? Well, we'll help do all that for you. So if this is at all of interest to you, reach out to us and let us help you grow your social media channel. I can tell you I did this for my business, and my social media is completely taking off. My Instagram, since I started doing this, jumped over 10,000 followers, and it continues to grow. So if this is at all of interest to you, check the bottom of the show notes for the link that says, "Get my social content done right now."